Reinstein come and speak to us. And there's stairs over here. If you want to come on up, I'll give you a mic. He is an emergency room acupuncture physician, and also at Northwestern Hospital in Chicago.
Nope, Minneapolis.
Oh, Minneapolis. Okay, I was wrong. I know there's one in Chicago.
Yep.
And he's been doing work, studies to show effectiveness in ER, and he's going to talk to us. Just say a couple words and see if that's...
Can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah.
Great. All right, well, I'm very grateful to be able to speak to you today. Enjoy your beverage. So much of how we relate to each other is through stories. I'd like to start off by sharing one that we can all relate to. The details may be different, but the theme of caring for others is the same. Minneapolis has a very large Somali community, and because of the location of the hospital's emergency room where I work, I treat a large percentage of them. The other night, I was treating a Somali gentleman who came in with left side shoulder and back pain. He had been in a motor vehicle accident the day before and was starting to feel the ramifications of it. Typically, patients don't feel too bad the first day after the accident, or of the accident, but by the next day, the real pain and stiffness start to set in. We see this all the time. Other than getting some x-rays and a CT scan to rule out hidden problems like broken bones or internal bleeding, what these patients need is someone to reassure them, to tell them they're fine, and to explain the natural course of the healing, which will take about a week or so. We also usually provide them with some pain relievers in the short term. This gentleman expressed a dislike of Western medicine, so the doctors thought offering him acupuncture would be a better alternative. When I offered him acupuncture, he was very receptive. After inserting the needles, I asked him about cupping, because I had recently heard from another Somali patient that cupping is a part of their traditional folk medicine. Just showing a little curiosity about his culture and beliefs started a wonderful conversation. He took out his phone and showed me pictures of the bleeding cupping he had done during Ramadan and shared the spiritual significance that holiday has for him. We talked about his travels to China and how he struggled to find appropriate foods to eat while he was there. He couldn't eat pork because of his religion, so he couldn't trust the foods at a lot of locations. While he doesn't eat at McDonald's in America, while he was there, he indulged. He told me how he survived on hard-boiled eggs, Starbucks tea, and pastries. The people he was with thought he was a little crazy. After the treatment, he told me the pain and stiffness had decreased and he was feeling much better. He even said he would consider following up with acupuncture in the future to help manage the soreness he gets from playing soccer. For me, this kind of experience and education is invaluable. Curiosity has been my guiding principle in life. I have an insatiable curiosity, which has led me on a very winding path. It was my curiosity about acupuncture research that led me to the job I currently have. It is your individual curiosity that I hope to spark here today. Not necessarily for doing acupuncture in an emergency department, but for listening to your own curiosity and encouraging you to explore our medicine with new and fresh eyes. It can be easy to get into a rut and practice the same way you always have. So why not try looking at our beautiful medicine through the eyes of a child where everything is possible? I hope to show you that this ancient medicine is truly an art, and as such can be expressed in a million different ways. Maybe by doing that, we will all figure out new ways to share our medicine with many more people. Maybe people who would not normally receive acupuncture. I'm excited to be able to offer you a glimpse into my world, bringing acupuncture into the emergency department of a large metropolitan hospital. I hope through this talk I can show you how remaining open and having a little sense of curiosity, we can expand our medicine and our lives in unimaginable ways. I'll start with a little bit of history and background, how I ended up in this position. I'll talk about the current challenge faced by our healthcare system and how we can be part of the solution. I'll share some more patient experiences that I think highlight how our medicine can add value even in a setting as chaotic as an emergency room. And finally, I will suggest that our humanity is much more important than our needle placement.
Yay.
Almost 5 years ago, I took a job as a research assistant for the Penny George Institute for Health and Healing at Northwestern Hospital in Minneapolis. The clinic I had worked in had recently closed, and I was doing acupuncture house calls in private homes and nursing homes, but needed a steady job to help pay the bills. I was hired to collect data on a large multi-year NIH-funded study that was designed to examine the impact of integrative medicine treatments on pain for hospitalized patients. Abbott Northwestern Hospital has one of the nation's largest inpatient integrative medicine programs in the country, and has been offering acupuncture, massage, aromatherapy, guided imagery, and healing touch for over a dozen years. Even though I wasn't going to be able to do any of the acupuncture, I thought this would be a noble cause. If this study could show a benefit in treating pain with integrative medicine in the hospital setting, perhaps it would encourage other hospitals to start offering this service. I figured it would be a worthwhile way to possibly help my profession grow and create opportunities for more acupuncturists. Little did I know I would be one of the acupuncturists given a new opportunity to expand our medicine in ways I never imagined. After being promoted to a research coordinator and working on a couple different vitamin D studies we were conducting, my boss offered me an opportunity to create an acupuncture program in the hospital's emergency department. He had been given some money from a philanthropist several years before, but the timing and staffing were never right. He thought that I would be a good fit given my varied acupuncture experience and style of treatment. The other thing that would help make this reality is that the medical director of the ER had been pushing to bring acupuncture to the department for years. Having his support definitely streamlined this process. Instead of coming into the ED and telling them all the great things acupuncture could do for them, I began first by meeting with the leadership team to find out what kinds of problems the department faced. I also shadowed doctors and nurses in the department to observe their workflow and look for opportunities where I could provide acupuncture in such a busy and chaotic setting. By being curious and putting my agenda aside, I was able to better understand the challenges faced in the department and provide the patients, staff, and hospital with a service that would be beneficial. One of the most shocking things I observed almost from day one was how often narcotics were used. I'd been a patient in the emergency department before, but my experiences were extremely different. Now I was seeing patients being given doses of morphine, Dilaudid, Vicodin, Percocet, Norco, and fentanyl to manage their various conditions, even when the patients appeared to be in minimal pain. It didn't take long to start seeing some of the unintended consequences of treating pain this aggressively. Soon I was getting to witness firsthand what's been all over the media lately, the opioid epidemic. This problem is so large and vast that it's easy for me to feel overwhelmed. Having worked in a hospital for almost 5 years, I've learned a great deal about how the system works and doesn't work. I can see so many systematic ways we fail our patients, and fixing it takes many more resources than I have. But if there is a silver lining to this opioid epidemic, it's that society may be starting to realize there is more to pain management than drugs. And that is where we come in. Here's a problem we are more than qualified to address. We can treat pain. We can offer up our medicine as one alternative to pain meds. Are we going to be the only solution to the problem? No. But we can start being part of the discussion. My research work in the ED is now focused on studying acupuncture as an alternative to opioids. The key is not waiting to be invited to the table to start having these discussions. We need to let everyone know that pain is in our wheelhouse and we want to be part of the solution. As Western medicine recognizes that they need to significantly change the way they manage pain, there have to be alternatives for them to turn to. They can't just stop addressing pain. So we need to be more proactive at letting them know we are here to help. It is in this setting that I get to do what I truly love, help people and indulge my sense of curiosity. One of the things I like about the hospital I work in is the diversity of the patients. People from all walks of life come to Abbott Northwestern for their care. Our patients represent every demographic category. We treat the rich, the poor, and the homeless. We have patients of many different races and ethnicities that may or may not speak English. Sometimes, in order to provide care, we have to communicate through interpreters. It's exciting to be able to give acupuncture to those that may not normally experience it. On the topic of providing acupuncture to those that may not normally receive it, I would like to share an opportunity that I had to bring acupuncture, not just into an emergency department, but into a trauma hospital in a third world country. During a casual conversation I was having with one of the ER docs who was retiring soon, I jokingly asked, "Aren't you going to miss all of this?" He told me he had plans to continue his international volunteer work that he had been doing in Haiti since the earthquake in 2010. I told him if he ever needed an international acupuncturist, to let me know. The next week, he came to me and asked if I wanted to go on their next trip to Haiti in 2 months. He said he wasn't really sure what I would do there since the trauma hospital that he brings volunteers to help staff had never had an acupuncturist, but I was welcome to join. I was only 2 months into working in the emergency department, where I was still trying to figure out the best way to do acupuncture in such a setting. And now I was given the opportunity to go to a country where I don't speak the language and deliver care to people who had never heard of acupuncture. Medicine in Haiti is like nothing I had ever seen before. Only a short plane ride from right here, I was transported to an alternate universe. In America, we have relatively few problems and many resources. In Haiti, it's the exact opposite. Their problems are gigantic, and they have very few resources. Haiti is one of the poorest countries in the world, and it has the infrastructure to prove it. We are practically drowning in pain medicine in this country. In Haiti, pain medicine is virtually non-existent. I saw so many people come into the hospital, sit quietly on a blood-stained mattress, and be treated with no medicine at all. I quickly realized Haiti was a perfect place for acupuncture. I hung out in the triage area and treated many of the patients that came in. Even though I didn't speak Creole, the Haitian staff were kind enough to translate for me. There was so much interest, I ended up treating many of the staff and even the director of the hospital. Acupuncture became so popular, one of the Haitian EMTs came running to find me one day to treat a hysterical schoolgirl that had come in, even before going to get the doctor. As the doctor that invited me on this trip likes to say, this may have been the first acupuncture stat order ever. In Haiti, medicine is all about improvisation. One day while treating patients outside the hospital's outpatient clinic, with a Haitian translator who worked for Acupuncturists Without Borders, I noticed that the women were kept asking for an extra alcohol swab after the treatment. I would give them one and notice they would open them up and sniff them. I asked my translator what they were doing. He said that in Haiti, sniffing alcohol was a common remedy for all kinds of ailments like headaches and nausea. This little piece of knowledge came in handy later on when a woman in shock came in and nothing would seem to snap her out of it. Her friend was spitting water in her face. I was trying to wave a lavender aromatherapy inhaler under her nose. Then I remembered the alcohol swab. I took one out, I waved it under her nose, and within seconds, her breathing had become deep and slow. She reached up and took the alcohol swab and continued inhaling it for some time. By following my curiosity while in Haiti, I ended up having so many different experiences beyond delivering acupuncture. Most of them just wouldn't be possible here in the States. One day I worked in a prosthetic lab and helped fit and construct prosthetic legs for a couple of patients. One night I witnessed up close and personal 2 codes being run on patients and provided another set of hands when needed. Another night, I jumped in and assisted the pediatrician as we performed CPR on 2 infants. By far the most unforgettable experience I had there was sitting in on a brain surgery to remove an epidural hematoma. I appreciate all of the opportunities to serve, as they have had a lasting impact on me. I have a new perspective on what problems are, and I tend to be more grateful and appreciative of all the things I have in my life. By the end of my week in Haiti, I had pushed myself beyond the limits I thought I was capable of. It turns out I had treated more patients with acupuncture than the doctors had treated all week. In acupuncture, as in life, we need to be open to any and all experiences. The easiest way to do that is by giving up expectations. Curiosity is the vehicle to let you give up expectations, to be present, to help heal. Unlike working in a traditional clinic, I'm not looking to build a relationship with my patients. Unless they are a frequent flyer in the ED, I rarely treat the same patient twice. I'd estimate in the 3 years I've been doing treatments in the ED, I've probably only given multiple treatments to the same patient a dozen times, if that. For me, the more important thing is to build rapport with them and to do it quickly. Since there are 35 beds in the ED and only one of me, there are usually plenty of patients for me to treat. My job isn't to sell acupuncture to them, but rather offer it. Since it's a free service, cost isn't an issue. I simply ask if they're interested in receiving an acupuncture treatment. Of course, if they have questions or concerns, I'm more than happy to address those so they can make a fully informed decision. It turns out that approximately 60 to 70% of the patients I see have never had acupuncture. In fact, there are times when I offer it to people, they accept it, and then they ask me what it is. I explain that acupuncture is a form of Chinese medicine that uses tiny needles inserted into various parts of the body. It's amazing how many times I hear that they've seen it on TV or in the horror movie Final Destination.
Yeah.
Surprisingly, most patients end up consenting to receive a treatment. Consider that for a moment. Just imagine every day in your clinic, most of the patients you treated were first-time patients with no previous exposure to acupuncture, and the odds are you would never treat them again. How do you think that would influence your treatments and affect your practice moving forward? In this digital age where electronic medical records contain enormous amounts of data on each patient, many times I prefer to avoid looking in the chart at all before going in to see the patient. Unlike the doctors in the department who spend a fair amount of time combing through their charts, gathering as much information as they can before they even see the patient, I prefer to walk in and treat the patient that's in front of me, many times without even knowing their name. Sometimes I hear negative comments from the doctors and nurses about the patient before I go see them. I have to do my best to leave this baggage outside the room so I can evaluate the patient for myself in that moment. I feel in this way I am fulfilling the primary principle that my teachers taught me. Treat what is in front of you. I'm not saying that medical history isn't relevant and useful, but many times it can interfere with my ability to be present and truly see the patient. Unlike the days when I spent my time in a dimly lit clinic with soft instrumental music playing, I now treat my patients working under the intensity of bright fluorescent lights, with the sound of heart rate monitors beeping all around and hearing code blue being paged overhead. Instead of relaxing incense or aromatherapy to help create a sense of calm, there are offensive odors of antiseptic cleaners and body fluids that assault the senses. Instead of patients coming to a place of refuge where they can escape the stressors of daily life, they step into an environment that immediately jumpstarts their sympathetic nervous system into high gear. This is my clinic now, and I love it. Through all of this, I've had to adapt to my surroundings and learn to let go of control. This was one of the biggest challenges at first, letting go of control. The patients aren't coming to the emergency room to see me, so I need to be flexible and fit my treatments into the system as it is. I'm just a small part of the entire care team. I don't have the luxury to lock the door and give the patient an hour-long treatment. Some patients may only be in the department for an hour or two, so I need to be able to fit my treatment in amongst all the other things that have to happen during their visit. You can think of the emergency department like a beehive, buzzing with activity. It's extremely common for multiple interruptions to occur during my treatments. While I'm in the room giving a treatment, the nurse may come in to start an IV or deliver medications. A lab tech may come in to draw blood for testing. Perhaps the registration staff may come in to verify insurance and have them sign some forms. Sometimes a pharmacist will come in to gather additional information about the patient's current medications. Of course, the ED provider may come back in to reevaluate the patient, or a hospitalist may come in to examine the patient before admitting them to the hospital. All the while, the patient is laying there with acupuncture needles in place. Not exactly what you would call a relaxing environment. Every part of the treatment I do in the emergency room is abbreviated. The intake, the assessment, and the treatment itself are reduced to the bare minimum. On average, my treatments last about 20 minutes and consist of 1 to 6 needles. My role is basically to manage symptoms. I don't ask too many questions or spend much time coming up with pattern differentiations. I find out where it hurts and use my favorite points to target the pain. Sometimes I consider what I do as delivering acupuncture aspirin, or in the case of anxiety, acupuncture Ativac. I tend to look at my job not only as a healthcare provider, but also as an acupuncture ambassador. Of course I want my patients to get relief from their problems, but I also want them to have a positive first experience with acupuncture. I know how important first impressions can be. Even if they don't get substantial relief, my hope is that the acupuncture treatment I provide will open their minds and show them new ways to manage their health. And if they have a positive experience, perhaps they'll tell their friends and family. In this way, I may also help grow the practices of acupuncturists in my community. As fun as this all sounds, this job isn't for everyone. There's a certain gallows humor that is necessary to be able to witness that much suffering day after day and carry on. In fact, just this week, I had a doctor tell me to go see a patient in room 30. I looked on the computer trackboard to see what the problem was, and I didn't see the patient listed. So I asked the doctor, what's wrong with them? She said, they're dead. To those uninitiated, this may seem like an insensitive joke. People that aren't used to seeing dead bodies at work might be offended. But I completely understood where this provider was coming from. This is one of the coping mechanisms ED providers have developed working in such a stressful environment. There isn't a sweeter lady than this doctor. She is one of the most caring people I know. She has experienced more suffering, both her own and that of her patients, than I ever will. But when your job requires that you be productive, you have to develop a way to quickly compartmentalize your feelings. The providers I work with may have to go from one room where they're managing a miscarriage, and then immediately go to the next room where they sew up a finger laceration, and then perhaps having to break the news to their patient that they've known for only an hour or two that they have a brain tumor. This may sound extreme, but this kind of stuff goes on every day in the emergency department. Once again, this job isn't for everyone. I can't stress this enough. Working in the ED, you are exposed to a lot of sickness and tragedy. In addition to the emotional trauma that you will experience, sometimes you even have to deal with physical and emotional abuse from the very people you're trying to help. Even if you aren't the one treating the patients, it's impossible to escape that energy. Whether it's hearing the doctors and nurses talking about a patient's condition, or walking by a room with an open curtain and seeing someone in an unfortunate state, everyone that works in that department is a victim of secondary traumatization, whether they acknowledge it or not. It's also the bond that holds us all together and makes us an effective team. One thing that stands out about many of the patients I see is how vulnerable they are. Not many of them planned on going to the emergency department when they woke up. Patients in the emergency department also tend to exhibit extremes in their behavior and emotional states. Sure, you see people that are in pain or anxious, but you also witness profound sadness, loneliness, depression, and even suicidal behavior. Some patients may be angry, mad, psychotic, delusional, and violent. Not only do you have to manage the emotions of the patients, but many times you also have to manage the emotions of their family members. When you step into that room, you have to be ready to possibly become part of a family drama in full swing. These are the times you have to bring your best self on their worst days. While the patient's problems may not be considered a true emergency in your eyes, it doesn't mean it isn't an emergency to them. Another thing I've had a lot of practice with is being with patients as they cry. Because of my concern for the safety of the patients, I never leave the room once the needles are placed. Some patients are curious and ask a lot of questions. Others are just chatty and want to talk throughout the treatment. Some watch garbage TV and text on their phones. But others are feeling miserable and maybe crying and sobbing the entire time. I found the best thing I can do in these instances is just hold space for them. The more centered and in control I am, the more I'm able to be there for my patients. I may offer a few words of support or simply acknowledge their pain. I do what I can to alleviate it to the best of my ability, but sometimes that's just not enough. I think sometimes the best thing is to just let the patient have their experience. If they need to cry, let them cry. If they need to scream in pain, let them scream in pain. They know what they need in that moment, so I trust them. I don't try to tell them how to feel or what to do. I simply walk beside them for a brief moment on their journey. The other night, I was working late in the ED and was asked to see an older woman who was in a lot of pain due to a variety of chronic health conditions. Before I got to the room, she had already received medications for her pain and anxiety, but they weren't really working. I went to her room and introduced myself and offered her an acupuncture treatment. She was skeptical and asked a lot of questions like, can this help with sciatic pain? What about knee pain? How about my neck pain? How about anxiety? I told her yes, acupuncture can address all of these pains and her anxiety. After I told her there would be no charge for the treatment, she agreed, and I placed a few needles and told her to relax as best as she could. I went to the computer and charted in the medical record, all the while fielding various questions from her about acupuncture and listening to her share her medical problems with me. After about a half an hour, I removed the needles and asked if she was feeling better. She apologized to me and said she was sorry, but she didn't feel any better. I told her she had nothing to be sorry about, and I was the one who was sorry since I wasn't able to help her more. She told me how much shame she feels because the people in her life, including her doctors, don't think she's doing enough to take care of herself. At that moment, she started to cry. Through the sobs, she told me she didn't want to keep living like this in so much pain. I reached out and touched her shoulder and held her hand. In that moment, there wasn't anything else I could do to help her. The drugs weren't strong enough, and my acupuncture wasn't strong enough. So in that moment, the only thing left to do was truly be present with the patient and help her feel not so alone. Sometimes holding space for our patients is the best thing we can do. It creates a sacred space for people to experience their emotions to the fullest. After a while, she stopped crying and asked me why I'd become an acupuncturist. I told her I thought it was a good way for me to use my gifts to be of service. The woman cocked her head and said, "You don't hear that word service much these days." Now a small smile came to her face and she asked me if I were a believer. I told her I believed in a lot of things. I was trying to make a joke, partly to avoid having a personal conversation where I have to share too much about myself, and partly so as to not disappoint her because I knew what she meant. She said, "I mean, do you believe in him?" I told her I didn't, as I was raised Jewish. To my surprise, her whole demeanor lightened up in that moment. I tried joking again and said, "Wasn't Jesus Jewish?" She said, "Yes, the best one." Then she told me that I looked like him.
That's cute.
She said earlier in the evening she had asked God to send someone to hold her hand. That she was going through this terrible pain. Then she smiled at me and said, "God has a wonderful sense of humor." I've come to realize over the years that sometimes my job involves acupuncture, but it always involves caring for people. I've talked a lot about how my curiosity has led me to this point in my acupuncture career. Now I want to invite you to recognize and honor your curiosity. What are you curious about? And how can you use that in your work and in service to others?